Hello everybody, I'm your host Quasar, and today, well, I've discovered the secrets of ICHOR. Not only that it's alive, but also the reasons the Twisteds are attacking us in the first place. Without further ado, let's get into it. So, first of all, how could ICHOR be alive? Well, that's what we're here to talk about, and we've never really seen it be alive. It's usually just a liquid. So the only time we see it move is whenever Sprout uses his ability, and it's not connected to him in any way. That's a lead. We'll keep that in mind later. But we have to talk about Twisted Fin of all things, and it's mainly his ability. Roll the clip. Now, what you're about to see is whenever you complete a machine while Twisted Fin is on a floor, you get covered with an ICHOR effect. It's really interesting to see, and what happens is it's like the ICHOR just explodes off of you. But this also gives you the side effect of being slow for a bit, and it's how the Twisteds can catch you. For example, if you're uncareful, you could get caught by a Twisted while doing the machine. It's really risky to do. Like right here, I just got caught. Now, the ICHOR going onto you is a very weird and important part of this. You could have just been given the slowness effect, but instead the ICHOR splashes onto you. We'll get into that in a second, but first, please subscribe. Only 5% of you guys are subscribed. 95% of you aren't. And to the 5% that are, thank you so much. Because if enough of you subscribe, I can buy tickets to Japan. My parents said we couldn't go, but if I buy the tickets, they can't say no. Look, I'm crying right now. You can see me. I'm crying. I just wanted to use the emotion. Okay, let's get back into this. So what we have to talk about is plants. Carnivorous plants more specifically. There are many of these. Pitcher pods, sundew, fly traps, and they all have one feature in common. They eat bugs. For example, all of them smell like meat to attract flies and other insects. If fly traps then clamp down and eat, they don't really eat them, but it looks like they're eating the ants and flies and whatever. Pitcher pods suck them in by making them fall into a hole at which they are slowly dissolved, and sundew crunches them up and drains them of any energy they would have, which is like really cool. It like sucks out all the nutrients. But we're here for cordyceps, and what cordyceps does is something very similar. It also wants to eat bugs, except not really. All cordyceps wants to do is spread, and it's more of a fungus and less of a plant, which is why it's so focused on spreading. So the big question here is, how does cordyceps spread? Because honestly, it's a bit terrifying. And I do have a disclaimer coming up. In case you're a sensitive viewer, I recommend you close your eyes or look away from your screen. So cordyceps will take over an ant and turn it into a zombie to then use it to climb to high places so it can expel the spores. Now, I want to be clear that this is not, it could not work on people, okay? Allow me to clarify. It only works on ants and other small bugs. It's actually healthy for people to eat it once it's been tampered in with. So people can even eat cordyceps. So the question here is, why does it take over ants? And that's very simple. Have you ever been walking in the spring and then out of nowhere this puff of smoke just comes down from a tree? That's pollen. And that is exactly what cordyceps is doing. It is using ants to go high up in the trees, and then they expel pollen. Now, if the pollen penetrates the ant's exoskeleton from below, so ants on the ground get their exoskeleton penetrated by the pollen, then cordyceps can infect them, take over their body, and keep spreading the infection. And once again, this does not work on humans. Allow me to clarify, people are completely safe from this. So, why does cordyceps do it? Well, it's not to have some zombie ant apocalypse, but rather to just keep itself alive, because spreading other means is much slower than taking over the ants and using their bodies to spread. It also applies to spiders and other small insects, so it could literally kill a population of spiders. If you have spiders around your house, maybe get some cordyceps. Just saying. So, we see something very similar happening with ICHOR, believe it or not. When we complete a machine when Twisted Fin is on a floor, we are covered and splashed in ICHOR. Now, that's really odd. However, it makes sense when you think about it, because if ICHOR is alive, it would want to spread to keep itself alive. That's why it splashes on you, and why the Twisteds attack you in the first place. It's not because they're blood hungry or driven crazy, simply so that they can spread their spores and keep living. Now, this may seem like some crazy conspiracy theory until you think back to Sprout's tentacle. One of the main ways cordyceps shows it has infected a plant, or an ant, is a giant stag coming out of them of cordyceps. And we see this happening with ICHOR, except it's on the ground. Sprout, who has clearly been infected by ICHOR, is using it as a weapon. He is using the ICHOR that's infected the building as a weapon. Now, let me clarify that cordyceps is a fungus. It has roots everywhere. And that could explain if ICHOR is already rooted down into the buildings. That could explain how this giant tentacle comes out of nowhere and attacks you. Not to mention the visual similarities between the two. Of course, cordyceps is more of an orange and ICHOR is black, but still, it's just one giant point coming out of a single point. Now, we actually see this whole thing happen with Glisten. We watch him turn twisted. Now, this is very odd considering cordyceps also takes a very large time to actually turn something twisted. And cordyceps and take over an ant. And it takes 14 to 12 days. Now, most of the time, the ant dies 6 days into this process. But the twisteds and the tunes are clearly much stronger than that. So I would not be surprised if Glisten lasted the entire 21 days up until his infection. Or it's even possible that ICHOR just is taking them over much faster. Another thing I have to bring up here is whenever the player character dies as any tune, you release a giant splotch of ICHOR as if you've already been infected. And by the time you die, you have to have. You can't get hit and just not die. You have to die by getting hit at least once. It's impossible to get damaged without being touched by a twisted. So it's clear that by the time you die, you've already been infected. Except in one case. And that, of course, is on floor 1 if you haven't done anything and died to not being in the elevator. But in order to do that, you couldn't do any machines because, as we've already clarified, those are infecting you with ICHOR, and you would have to stand still the whole time. However, we also already clarified that the ICHOR is already infecting everything else. We can see puddles of it everywhere, and it is quite literally able to come out of the floor. So even then, if you were just standing still, you would have to have been infected. Maybe you were running around the entire time too. Then the chance you run into a twisted or even a puddle of ICHOR is extremely high. But even then, there's a terrific chance that the ICHOR does come out of the ground and still infect you, even while running. Now, one big question some of you must have had is, why are we getting ICHOR in the first place? Well, it's been clear that the ICHOR is for Dandy, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some curing process that he's doing. You see, Dandy is using the ICHOR to create replicas of the tunes that we play as. Now, the reason he does this is so he can get more ICHOR. That's confusing in itself, and I don't have time to go over the entire ICHOR operation here. I'm still working on that. But he has to cure it. It is clearly taking over the twisteds and controlling them to make them hunt us, just like cordyceps would. So how are we able to have ICHOR in us, and why are we extracting ICHOR? Well, it's as simple as tea. So you see, there is actual cordyceps tea that people can drink. Now this may seem odd, but you can kill cordyceps, because just like any other plant or fungi, it's not impossible to kill. Dandy is killing the cordyceps, and then he's using it to create more tunes that we play as to go down and get more ICHOR. Now, you never come back up. You were never supposed to come back up. You go down, keep going down further. And that's because Dandy knows you're infected by the time you complete that first machine. He doesn't want to bring you back up. Sure, he'll still interact with you in his shop, but that's very secluded. No one can get to him. And that's very odd. You could get to him with hacks or something, but you're not supposed to be able to do that, so it's not canon. And that, Quarks, is exactly how cordyceps and ICHOR are practically the same. It's just a means of color variation, honestly. And I feel like this covered everything about this. So if you don't believe it's cordyceps, you don't believe ICHOR is cordyceps, or cordyceps is ICHOR, then cool. Honestly, it's just a theory. A game theory. Either way, please subscribe, because my mom said we couldn't go to Japan, and so did my dad. However, I'm sure that if I buy the tickets, then we can go. In fact, my dad watched a previous video of mine, and he wasn't upset about it. So thanks for watching. Subscribe. Momentai.